Years, every time I did research, I was told to keep things tangible, keep things focused on the things that we can see and touch. Yet, the more I did research on the site, the more I realized how uninteresting the tangible world is and how interesting the non-tangible, non-visible world is. And that world is the world of waves and frequencies, most of which quantum physics addresses, or tries to address at least. I'm not a physicist, but I'm extremely interested, and I've read a lot about the findings of those great physicists, especially when it pertains to quantum biology, because I think that even the brain and all the cells can be much better explained at that point of view. And one of the main things that I noticed when I was doing my research was that the majority of literature, the majority of findings up until now have been mainly focused on the tangible, especially when it comes to brain. Obviously, the rest of the body, human body as well, but I'm just at this point going to focus on the brain. And it was nothing that no one ever talked about, no one ever told me. It was just something innate that I noticed because I was in search for a holistic meaning, for example, of us understanding the brain. And the more I read, the more I researched, the more I realized how little we know. In fact, most of the knowledge that we have today of our own brain, it's our own freaking brain that we should probably know much more about than we do today. They were on the physical level. So essentially, the scientists have basically categorized and did different sections of the brain, poked humans to elicit some type of a reaction, measured that reaction and said, aha, if this person is fearful, for example, we see that the amygdala, for example, lit up. Fair enough. Obviously, we need to have that point of view as well. However, the science of, or the focus on the physical sciences really doesn't address a lot of questions that we have about ourselves. And that is when my interest peaked, because I noticed how incompetent a lot of these findings were in terms of trying at least to address some of our most fundamental questions that we have about human beings. Hence, the study of brainwaves in this case is, to some extent, in my point of view, it is embarrassing, because all we've done is that we categorize brainwaves, we measure them, categorize them based on 5-6 different range of frequencies, and we said, okay, if a person, for example, closes their eyes and they are in meditation mode, it's more likely that it's alpha, and all it means is that the frequencies are, for example, between 8 and 15, more or less. And then we left it at that. We went back to focusing again on what the freaking different lobes, for example, mean. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. We do need to study the physical as well, but it's quite questionable where we just focus mainly on one aspect when we do research in anything. Yet when you start looking at quantum physics and try to look at biology from a quantum physics or quantum mechanics perspective, I should say, suddenly a lot of things that we haven't been able to really address start making sense. For example, the quantum biology of our sensory of smell, as well as the navigation. For example, study of birds who do migration without knowing anything. It all start making sense when you look at it from the quantum biology point of view. And why is that? That's because quantum biology looks at quanta. It looks at waves. It looks at frequencies. It looks at electrons, the dance of the electrons. And that is very fascinating. At this point, there is absolutely no doubt in my mind that the brain frequencies can also, at a much deeper level than we know today, be explained at the quantum level, because I still haven't been able to figure out and get a satisfactory answer to the fact that we emanate frequencies, and that's how we transfer information. That's how we communicate within ourselves and with everybody else. How is that happening? What does that mean even? What is actually even information? That is one of my longest questions I've ever had. And I don't have the answer to that, but I do have the quest to do the research on it and look at deeper level on it. And based on what I've found so far, along with my own research hunch and research gut feeling, is that all that can be explained at the wave and frequency level, that the information somehow transfers through these electrons, through, I should say, subatomic level, at the quantum level, as Einstein put it. And that is how it's being transferred. Because when we look at, for example, the communication explained from the physical point of view in the brain that we know of today, we only talk about, for example, neurotransmitters. But how the heck do they even start eliciting a neurotransmitter? How does that even happen? We say, well, okay, we see something, we react towards it, and we'll elicit, for example, a type of a neurotransmitter. Yet we still don't know how that specific neurotransmitter, how does it even know that it's supposed to elicit that neurotransmitter, which then in its case go out and does certain things, for example, to our cells. So neurotransmitters, again, different parts of the brain, they're all physical, but they must be initiated somehow. And that somehow is at the non-tangible, invisible waves and frequency level. And that is where we lack a lot of research. We lack basically in-depth knowledge of it. And we need more people to engage much more than we do today. I'm not saying that we're not doing research. I'm not saying that we don't understand it. I'm just saying that in comparison to the physical, it's much less. And so the question is, why haven't we spent enough time, money, and effort to study and understand, or even show more initiation towards this more interesting, non-tangible, invisible world of waves and frequencies in comparison to the tangible and physical world? One of the main reasons is that we definitely show more interest in the things that we see as opposed to the things that we don't see. However, if we really think about it, the reason this non-visible, non-tangible waves and frequency world is much more interesting is because it is still not defined. It's still not discovered. It's still malleable, and it's still creative, and it still can create everything else. Think about it, everything starts with a thought, and a thought is an electrical impulse within our neurons, for example, and an electrical impulse is the non-visible, the non-tangible, the wave frequency world. And that is how it starts. And so anything that is created at the physical level in this world starts with a thought. See it in your own life. And that is the initiation. The initiation starts with that, within that non-tangible waves and frequency world, and then it translates gradually, if we stick with it, to the physical world. And that's why the non-physical is much more interesting, because at that point of a thought, it's still not discovered. It's still creative, and it still has much more potential. I have experimented with this both in my own life as well as in my own lab. And one thing that I keep discovering over and over again is that the fact that it's absolutely possible for the thought that is being elicited, for it to take form in the physical world while it is still forming, while it is still under the control of the person who is thinking. The thinker is the creator. And so it is no longer a mumbo jumbo thing that only maybe non-scientists talk about. We are in an era where science is able to gradually make those points as well. And so for these reasons, the study and us understanding and even be curious about these non-tangible worlds in shape of waves and frequencies must be a priority. We must become much more curious, whether we are scientists or not. Whether you are in the field of science or a consumer of different product, or your occupation is anything, it really doesn't matter. The understanding and our curiosity and our focus should, especially from now on moving forward, be more towards that, because there is a wealth of knowledge and a lot of secrets there to be found. And why would we want to discover those secrets? First of all, because we're humans, we ask questions and we are curious, because that type of understanding and discovery about that non-tangible world will just enable us and increase our own awareness as human being in our lifetime, whether we use it in science or in our daily lives. Learning and having, I should say, more control over these wave formats, over these frequency formats that we have been given totally for free since we were born, will help us and enable us to have a much better lives. So as opposed to living mediocre, normal, maybe tough lives that a lot of us are going through, in that case, we could use these frequencies to enable our lives for whatever we choose to be or to have. And however way you look at it, the increased focus and increased sort of spending time and effort on this invisible waves and frequency, and try to make that connection with our own biology, is just a win-win situation, whether we are in this field or not, whether we're just doing it as a hobby or not. And yet we still want the tangible. Every time, for example, that I do research, people are still talking about what's the tangible results, yet us not thinking about how incredible this non-tangible world is, simply because it is yet to be understood, it is yet to be discovered, it is yet to be formed and shaped, and it's yet to be created. Because once anything takes the form of a physical, it's basically a done deal. A table, for example, well, unless you go and saw the table and cut it in pieces, but if you just leave it at that, it's just a table and it's just in that format. Yet a thought could take shape and form of many different things within the extremely short amount of time, within any space, and it is just an electrical impulse. And that is where the information and the secrets are, and we should pay more and more attention and understanding towards that aspect of our being, as opposed to the things that we've already built, like the table, for example. And again, these topics, a lot of people think that I should be a scientist to think about these things. No, on the contrary, many people could do the critical thinking and do their own reading and make it so that they can use it in their own lives. Some people turn to religion or spiritual practices and do it that way. Nothing wrong with that. But some people do it in different ways. However way we choose to do it, it is definitely a world that is worth our time. It's worth our effort. And it's worth our love. I have no idea what you guys think about this, whether you love or hate it. I don't know, but I hope you find it some food for thought, because the science is moving forward, but it's not moving fast enough. And if you look at it 100 years back, it is still as if we are, going in circles in the physical. And because we already have majority of science and majority of people thinking about the physical, we can use anyone who chooses and wants to pay more attention and focus to this aspect as well. And there are many of us, but there are not enough. So, food for thought. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time. Bye.